Okay, we're going to have a look at the track options available to you in Logic, what they are and what they mean. So when you have a new project open, you are able to add new tracks by clicking on this plus icon here in the Arrange page. And you get this prompt, which appears when you start a new project in Logic as well. And you've got 3 track options: audio tracks, software instrument tracks, and external MIDI tracks. Okay, so first of all, you're able to create a number of tracks simultaneously. This speeds up the process rather than having to create one audio track, then another, then another, then another. You can sort of, if you're doing an 8-track recording in the studio, 8 microphones on a drum kit, you could pop in 8 audio tracks. The format is sort of defaults to mono. You can choose either stereo or surround. Obviously, if you're using one microphone on the input, then it's going to be a mono sound source. If you're working with imported stereo tracks from a CD or an MP3, then you would maybe want to choose the stereo option. Also, another nice quick thing when you're working in the studio, if you have put 8 microphones on a drum kit and you want those all going in, and they're going in on different inputs of the sound cards, you have input options here. If you click ascending, it will automatically assign the input to each of those 8 channels. So track number 1 will have input number 1, 2 will have input number 2, and so on and so on, rather than having to create the tracks and then having to assign the inputs, which wastes time really in the studio. So the input option here, I've only got 2 inputs. That's because I'm just using a standard desktop Mac computer. Those 2 inputs are the microphone, which is built into the Mac, and also input 2 is the line input. We can also assign buses to be the inputs as well. We can do sort of internal routing in the project. Output, you're going to usually want that to default to stereo output, unless for some reason you're doing a surround mix or something different, or if you wanted to route the output to an external mixing desk in the studio, then you may want to choose a different output. But for most of the sort of sequencing work you do on a digital audio workstation, stereo output is going to be fine. We then also have input monitoring, and you're able to automatically monitor the what's going in on the channel without having to input monitor, click the input monitoring icon. You can also auto record enable as well. You can do this once you create the track, but these are just sort of global functions, if you like, to speed up the process. And it also gives you the option as well to open library. This is the media browser library within Logic, which resides over here. Again, it's up to you whether you want that to be opened automatically or not. So you choose your track that you want. In this case, I'm going to choose audio. I'm going to create 8 audio tracks. I'm going to set them all to input number 1, my microphone, and mono input, and hit create. Excellent. So it pops in my audio tracks there. You'll notice mine starts at 2. That's because I've actually got another audio track hidden, so you can hear my voice. I've assigned that already to the microphone. So with audio tracks, these are for recording sounds going into the computer or searching for loops over in the loop browser and dragging those into your project to use for composition and sequencing, creation of music. To be able to hear the sounds going into the computer, you need to record enable, or record ready as they call it in Logic, the track. You can monitor what's going in by clicking the input button, so you can probably hear that there, and you can see over there in the inspector window what's going in, me talking. You can name tracks by double clicking on their name. So this may, if this was a drum kit in the studio, this may be the kick drum, for example. Mute on the track, fairly self-explanatory track as well, if you wish to do so. So that's audio tracks. I'm just going to remove those. We're going to add new tracks again. Software instrument. Software instrument tracks are for your built-in Virtual Studio instruments that exist within Logic, and there's hundreds of them, loads of different sounds and different instruments you can use and create. Again, you can create multiple instruments at the same time from this window. Multi-timbral instruments. Well, it tells you there we go, to create tracks and different strips. So for example, if you were using a drum machine, for example, you could output your multi-timbral instrument, you could output from the drum machine like the Ultra Beat inside Logic. You could have the kick drum going in on one track, the bass drum appearing on another track, the snare appearing on another track, hi-hat, so on and so forth. So let's for that kind of that sort of option. Output again 1 and 2. I will choose Open Library on this, so I can browse the library for a sound that I want. Software instrument, one of them I'm going to hit Create. Okay, so by default, when you click the Open Library option, it does assign an instrument to the software instrument track for you. And you can play that straight away using a MIDI keyboard. Okay, and it assigns an electric piano to it. It will open your library. If for some reason you can't see this section over here, then if you click on the Media Browser option up in the top right hand corner and then click on the Library tab, you'll be able to see all your various instruments. So if I wanted to choose a drum kit, for example, I can go on to drums and percussion, acoustic drums, and I can load up a 1970s sounding drum kit, and I can play that. Sometimes a question that crops up is how can you go back and change this? Now, if I wanted that to be piano, for example, well, you've got to sort of go back through the hierarchy of folders, and it took me a while to work this out when I first started using Logic. It kind of caught me out, which is a bit silly really, but there's a scroll bar down the bottom here. It's quite easy to miss, but if you use that you can scroll back over to your main folders and then choose a different sound. Also, loading up preset options, it's you have to make sure that you've got this tab up here selected, the preset setting, if you like, for the channel, in order to go through the folders and choose the instrument. If, for example, you've clicked, in this case, on an effect, then in your library it's going to give you different options, the options for the presets for the reverb, or if you've clicked on something else, for example, then it's not going to show you what you want to see when you first start Logic. So you click on that tab there to go back to the main kind of folders where you can choose the different instruments. Okay, again, recording. If you want to record some sound onto this track, you need to make sure it's record enabled by pressing the R button. Muting and solo, don't need to hopefully explain that. And there we go, there we have software instrument. And there was one more option if I click on Create Tracks again, and that's the external MIDI option. Now, if I just create an external MIDI track, external MIDI track will allow you to well, do a couple of things really. It's creating a standard MIDI track. You could route MIDI data in and out of your computer. So, for example, you could send your MIDI data off to an external effect, sound module. You could route MIDI data off to other external devices as well. Internally, what you can do within your computer, if you have got other softwares such as Reason, Sibelius in this case, and Reason, then this is how you can rewire the two softwares, meaning that we could open up Reason as well, and we could route MIDI from Logic through into Reason to control an instrument within the Reason software. So it's like a kind of useful thing for internal routing. Okay, there's a helicopter going by now, so I'm going to stop recording there, and hopefully that gives you a bit of an overview of the different tracks that you can create in Logic.